That was Donald Trump in Michigan yesterday, hoping to get a few new recruits for his historic effort with the RNC. Their goal is to mobilize 100,000 people in battleground states to ensure transparency and fairness in the upcoming election, despite the fact that there is vanishingly little evidence of any election fraud ever, and especially in the 2020 election. But anyway, NPR reports that Trump's campaign was promoting the effort at his Michigan rally with signs on every porta potty and with an army of people who had clipboards signing up volunteers. That is happening as many of Trump's supporters tell NBC News they aren't prepared to accept a Biden victory as legitimate. What could go wrong? Joining me now is Ari Berman, national voting rights correspondent at Mother Jones, and also the author of the brand new book, Minority Rule, the right-wing attack on the will of the people and the fight to resist it. It is out now. Ari, thank you for joining me. You
Great
are
to see you.
My favorite reporter on all things relating to our elections process.
Thank you.
I just wonder, what is your reaction to this notion of this massive recruitment staged by Trump and the RNC to recruit poll watchers who are supposed to be monitoring ballot tabulation, mail ballot processing, post-election canvases, audits, and recounts?
Well, it's very frightening. It feels like what the Trump campaign is doing is promising voter suppression on steroids. And just to give a little context here, this kind of quote-unquote ballot security operation was illegal for the Republican Party for many, many years, because in the 1980s, they sent police officers to Black and Hispanic precincts in New Jersey to intimidate them and prevent them from voting. They weren't allowed to engage in this for many, many years. Then there was a consent decree that expired that allowed them to do this. But remember, this isn't just everyday poll watching. This is the candidate that tried to overturn an election, inspired an insurrection, and now is trying to recruit people. So this isn't just like a bunch of old ladies standing around watching you vote. This is trying to intimidate people and targeting certain voters and saying that there's something dangerous happening with the voting process.
Yeah, you say certain voters. In your book, I'll read a quote. The effort to overturn the 2020 election, more so than any other event in modern American history, would reveal the extraordinary tactics the country's conservative white minority would employ to attempt to prevent a new multiracial governing majority from taking power. I would assume that the most of this election chicanery, which is euphemistic, election subversion, that Trump is planning would probably focus on Hispanic and Black communities, much as his 2020 election subversion claims or election subversion efforts did. Knowing the country as you do, what do you think are the particularly vulnerable communities for campaigns like Trump's?
Well, you just look at where Trump tried to overturn the election and spread lies about the election. I mean, it was Atlanta, it was Detroit, it was Philadelphia, it was Phoenix. What do all these places have in common?
People of color.
People of color and large Democratic populations, and they weren't very coy about this. And so they're going to be targeting those same communities again. And what Trump is trying to do is he's mixing racism, nativism, and voter suppression. He's demonizing immigrant communities. He's demonizing people of color. And he's saying that something illegitimate happened in these communities in 2020. And therefore, they're trying to prevent it from happening again in 2024. And what I argue is the overarching goal of the Republican Party is to try to succeed in 2024, where they failed in 2020, and to try to institutionalize the insurrection through every means possible.
To some degree, there's an awareness heading into 2024 of what's possible, right? So that would seem to be one bulwark against it. But then you hear about, the people who have been tasked traditionally with monitoring these polls, the election workers. I think the statistic is at least 36%. That's more than a third of local election offices have changed hands since 2020. There's been an exodus of people who usually work these polls and an influx of new people. That's not to say that they're all, people intent on subverting the democratic process. But does it concern you that it could be a bunch of newbies running one of the most contested elections of our lifetimes?
Yeah, and a lot of people who want to subvert the election have taken major positions. They've taken major positions in the Republican Party, and they've taken major positions in certain election offices. And this is just one way they've tried to rewrite the voting system. They changed all the voting laws in key states after the 2020 election. They put all of these election deniers in key positions. They put all these anti-democracy candidates on the ballot. I think a lot of people feel like because it didn't succeed in 2020 or even in 2022, a lot of these state races, it won't succeed in 2024. But the election denier movement is stronger than it was before. It's more organized, it's better funded, and they know what they want to accomplish now in a way that it was much more seat of the pants in 2020.
Well, as dark as that picture is, you also draw attention to the fact that elections popular elections are actually some of the most, the remaining levers we have to really shape this country and move it away from minority rule to majority rule. I'm just going to read a quick excerpt from an op-ed in the New York Times today. For years, Democrats have prioritized federal elections over state ones, but they should look to the states as the most effective avenue for progressive reform, especially since state power is very likely to only increase even as the federal system is stacked against Democrats. I mean, this has to do with the issue of gerrymandering, the Electoral College, and many other things. But as much as there is despair around elections, you also see, especially state and local elections, as cause for hope. Can you talk more about that?
Exactly, because what I'm saying is that the attempt to undermine American democracy has led to an equally fervent movement to protect American democracy. And there's a lot of success stories, because while at the federal level we have these broken institutions like the Electoral College, the U.S. Senate, the Supreme Court, a lot of interesting things are happening at the state level, like in Michigan, for example, banning gerrymandering, expanding voting rights, protecting reproductive rights. So there's models we can look to at the state level for how places that seem seemingly rigged can move from minority rule to majority rule. And I think that's important, because I want people to understand that
all hope is not lost.
All hope is not lost. That places that would have seemed like case studies for undermining democracy in the course of a decade can change into case studies for protecting democracy.
And indeed, Michigan's change in 2018 laid the groundwork for Michigan votes to be counted fairly in 2020, right?
Exactly. And for the Michigan legislature to flip in 2022 when the popular votes actually led to legislative outcomes that were fair. And so there's really important state politics that I think often get overlooked. We only seem to talk about the states when it's a national context, right? But all state battles are national battles right now, with voting rights, with reproductive rights, with so many other issues. And if the federal system is broken, we need to change that. But that could potentially take a long time. So changing the states is sometimes a lot quicker.
Democrats, all for states' rights. Down is up is down. We live on Earth 1 and sometimes Earth 2. Ari Berman, thank you for being here tonight. The new book is Minority Rule. It is out on stands now.